Universal wanted a sequel to Jaws early into the success of the original film. Producers David Brown and Richard D. Zanuck realized that someone else would produce the film if they did not, and preferred to be in charge of the project themselves. In October 1975, Steven Spielberg told the San Francisco Film Festival that making a sequel to anything is just a cheap carny trick, and that he did not even respond to the producers when they asked him to direct Jaws 2. He claimed that the planned plot was to involve the sons of Quentin Brody hunting a new shark. Brown said that Spielberg did not want to direct the sequel because he felt that he had done the definitive shark movie. The director later added that his decision was influenced by the problems the Jaws production had faced. He was quoted saying, "I would have done the sequel if I hadn't had such a horrible time at sea on the first film." Despite Spielberg's rejection, the studio went ahead with plans to make the sequel, leading to an 18-month pre-production process, which would lead to Janat Swark's 1978 film, Jaws 2.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, Jim.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. Connor is here with you, and as always, I am along with Chris. Chris, how are we doing today?
Doing fantastic. I'll say this to our loyal listeners. For them, it has been 1 week since Jaws, but for us, it has been a very, very long time. So we're excited to record this episode.
Absolutely. Hitting off with Jaws 2 today, like Chris said, it has been a couple weeks that we have been trying to get this episode together and make everything line up. So this is a conversation that has been on the books for a while.
Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, how about you go ahead with us and tell us what you remember about this film, or when you first seen it, what you how you appreciated it on the most recent rewatch for the podcast.
Yeah, so for this one, the first time and only time I had ever seen it as a child was during the VHS Blockbuster video days. So you're talking late 90s, maybe early 2000s at the latest, but probably more of a 90s scenario. And very, very vague memories of it. And for a few years there, until I rewatched the original, in my youth, I could have easily confused scenes and moments from the first two movies because I wasn't hyper familiar with them. And then for the last 20 years, I only had ever seen the original film. And so I only had just a few vague memories of this one. I didn't watch it in the DVD or Blu-ray days until this recent watch. And so it was almost like watching it for the first time. Outside of just a few sort of visual moments that had stuck with me, it was basically like seeing the film for the first time. And yeah, it was a very solid, hard to follow up an all-time classic like Jaws, but about as good of a sequel as, a forced sequel to a movie like that could be. It's hard to imagine this one being any kind of classic that measured up to the original, but they generally seem like they made the most of it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of on the opposite end as you. These, Jaws, Jaws 2, the entire series of the four Jaws films are something that I started at a young age, probably, again, 6, 7 years old, 5 years old, somewhere around there. And I watched them all growing up. I probably watched these movies every year. Sometime throughout the year, I was watching Jaws 3 or Jaws the Revenge or 2 or the original. And this is one of the ones that I always went back to, being that it was kind of the one closely related to the original. We get the Brody family back with Chief Brody and his wife Lorraine, or played by Lorraine Gary, and it's one of those films that when I was younger, of course, I would skip to the end, the last 30 minutes with the kids out in the water on the boats and getting attacked by the
Mhm.
shark and whatnot. But it's one of those films now that I don't watch very often, but when I do, I put it in. I'll sit and watch the entire film and just kind of like go back to my childhood and have a good time during it because like you said, how do you follow up one of the what is still one of the biggest films and most like influential films in history, and this is what they followed it up with. So I think they did the best with what they could with all the problems they had, and I still have fun with this to this day.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a good sequel,
This film's just one of those that you do the best you can with what you have, and I mean I still like the characters in this film. We get more of the shark in this film, which to me is always great. For being 78, I think the shark looks great. But it's just it's all around. I think we try to dive into a little bit more character with Chief Brody and like almost like the downfall of him and just kind of going crazy thinking thinking and pretty much knowing there's another shark and nobody believing him, and it just it turns into he turns into a very easy character to root for. And like the sons, of course you don't want his sons to get attacked by the shark or anything. And for a follow up to something that was as massive as Jaws, I always have fun with this one. And again, unlike Chris, I go back to this one probably once a year and just to, you know, keep it in the memory. I almost didn't have to watch this for the podcast this go around because I have seen this film so many times that I just went off straight memory, but I did end up watching it again.
Yeah, I ended up watching it twice because of the prolonged, you know, delays and mishaps we were experiencing. So I was like, I've got to watch it again to make sure that it stays fresh and I can have a decent discussion about it. Definitely one of the first, as far as I can see, one of those early horror thriller sequels where you have the hero or surviving character from the first one sort of deal with the kind of trauma and paranoia that carries over. When I was a kid, one of the first times I saw something like that was maybe like Halloween H2O, where you see Laurie Strode kind of she's having visions of Michael and dealing with it, like dealing with it in that way, just the trauma and the mental kind of stress of it. And this is like one of the earlier examples of a movie doing that. And it's like, oh, you can see how this kind of lays the groundwork. Like you bring the main hero back as a bit of a tortured soul kind of a situation. So it was interesting to see in this movie.
Absolutely. I always appreciate, as we've said before, I am a like creature feature like sharks, crocodiles, snakes, grit bears, whatever it is. And when it's like man against beast or like man against animal, I love those kind of films. So like all these Jaws films and shark movies and stuff like that, they were like my bread and butter growing up.
Hmm.
I'll get into a little information and background on Jaws 2 for you. Jaws 2 is a 1978 American horror thriller film directed by Janat Swark and co-written by Carl Gottlieb, and it is the sequel to Steven Spielberg's 1975 film Jaws and the second installment in the Jaws franchise. The film stars Roy Scheider as Police Chief Martin Brody, with Lorraine Gary and Murray Hamilton reprising their respective roles as Martin's wife Ellen Brody and Mayor Larry Vaughn. It also stars Joseph Mascolo, Jeffrey Kramer, Colin Wilcox, Ian Dusenberry, Mark Gruner, Susan French, Barry Coe, Donna Wilkes, Gary Springer, and Keith Gordon in his first feature film role. And the plot concerns Chief Brody suspecting another great white shark is terrorizing the fictional seaside resort of Amity Island, following a series of incidents and disappearances, and his suspicions are eventually proven true. Like the production of the original film, this film was troubled, with the first director of the film, John D. Hancock, proved to be unsuitable for an action film and was replaced by Schwartz. Scheider, who only reprised his role to end a contractual issue with Universal, was also unhappy during production and had several heated exchanges with Schwartz. There were stories about that to where they actually got into a physical altercation, but in like behind the scenes stuff, like some people have denied it, other people haven't. So we don't really know the true story on that. But there
Yeah,
was quite a bit of trouble behind the scenes of this film.
yeah. Sometimes you get the feeling that um, I would say that sometimes you get the feeling that there's probably either a lot more behind the scenes drama that goes on than you ever hear about, or I mean, maybe a lot less. I guess suppose it's dramatic to drum it up, but something tells me that we don't hear about 80 to 90% of the conflicts and arguments and debates that probably happen during the making of these movies day to day. When you think about how many people get involved and how much goes into it, you have to imagine that people are probably debating and arguing and having difficulties all the time.
Yeah, it's just like anyone else with their coworkers. If you spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day with your coworkers, it's like your family or close friends. You're eventually going to get into a disagreement, an argument, or something. Somebody's going to take something said the wrong way. So I mean, it's like a big family, and well, I mean, all productions have disagreements and whatnot. So I mean, but uh, some of the stories on Jaws too are a little bit extreme with physical contact between Scheider and the director.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
With all the trouble behind it, though, the film was released on June 16th, 1978, to mixed reviews. While the performance of Roy Scheider, Lorraine Gary, and Murray Hamilton, the special effects, and the score by John Williams were praised once again. It received criticism for essentially duplicating the formula of the first film, but however, it is regarded in retrospective as the best of the three Jaws sequels, which I can agree with that statement there.
Yeah, not a terribly high bar to clear, but I mean, it's always tough when the criticism becomes, oh, it's formulaic. Well, once you have a franchise and once you decide to make sequels, there are a lot of genres of movie where you can then have a sequel that's very wildly different from the original. With something like Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back gets to be very different from the first. Aliens gets to be very different from the first, but you constantly have to balance the act of, the first was a hit for a reason and everyone loved it, and we want to do more in this series and turn it into a series. But, you know, eventually, if you're just going to be new and innovative and different, then what are you making a sequel for? Kind of the buy-in of doing another one is that you're kind of going to retread a little bit of the same water. And so it's a balancing act of, well, how much do we change it to keep it fresh? And at what point do you change it so much that it's not really a sequel or a continuation? You have to keep it in the world. With a concept like a shark attack, there's not a whole lot of different spins you can do with any sequel to make it wildly fresh or interesting or dynamic. So, it's always tough to hear movies where when the big criticism is, oh, it's just a rehash, or oh, it's just sticking to the formula. It's like, well, yeah, some of the inherent, you know, core elements of these types of movies is a formula, So I'm not the biggest fan when people just say like, oh, it's formula.
Well, and then I know the director said, he was quoted saying, "We must show the shark." Like as soon as he came on set, like that was something he said, "We must show the shark early and often." And it's like, well, besides that, like first initial attack, like on the water skier, like you don't really see the shark too much. After that, it's like another half hour, 40 minutes or so, and then kind of like the original Jaws, like that last half hour, you get quite a bit of the shark. So it's like, did you really show the shark that much more? I mean, you showed the shark earlier on in the film, but I would have taken more of the shark in this film. Another 5 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, if you would have told me, hey, do they show the shark more in two than one? I'd be like, yeah, I got the sense that they did, but it's not like I I don't know if I came away from number 2 saying like, oh man, they really went all out on showing that shark a lot. Like they really came at this with a mandate of showing the shark early and often. Like they still, hold it back quite a bit. So, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, they showed the shark all the time in this one. I didn't get that sense.
No, and I mean, I think still what we got of the shark in this is good, but as in the first one, I'm not gonna say no to more shark screen time, especially when it's a animatronic that took hundreds of hours of work put into it. So I'll always take more.
Yeah, if you've spent the money, you might as well show it off a little bit.
Absolutely. Why don't we go ahead and get into a trailer for Jaws 2? We'll get into a plot synopsis and we will continue on with this sequel.
In all the vast and unknown depths of the ocean, how could there have been only one?
Chief Brody, can we go, please?
I think we may have another shark problem. Are you serious?
Roy Scheider.
I ordered my guy! The whole beach looks incredible.
Lorraine Gary. And Murray Hamilton.
Look at this. That's a shark. Look, Brody, you started a panic on a public beach. Now, what if somebody decides to sue us? That's a shark. Did you ever stop to think about that?
And I know what a shark looks like because I've seen one up close. And you better do something about this one because I don't intend to go through that hell again.
Don't press it this time.
Mike is out there.
None of man's fantasies of evil can compare with the reality of Jaws. The all-new Jaws 2. See it before you go back in the water.
Four years after the killing of the great white shark, a new hotel opens on Amity Island, while another great white shark kills two scuba divers photographing the wreckage of the orca. Their camera, which took pictures during the attack, is recovered. The shark then kills a water skier. The driver of the boat attempts self-defense by using a gas tank and flare gun, but the boat explodes, killing her and severely burning the shark's face. A killer whale carcass is found on the beach. Police Chief Martin Brody believes that a shark is responsible. He then finds floating debris from the destroyed speedboat and the boat's driver's burnt remains. He calls Matt Hooper for assistance, but he is in Antarctica on a research expedition. Brody prohibits his 17-year-old son Mike from boating out of concern for his safety. The following day, Brody watches the beach from an observation tower and causes a panic after mistaking a school of bluefish for a shark and shooting at it. However, his fears are confirmed when photos from the divers' cameras are processed and one shows the shark. When he presents it to the Amity Town Council, they refuse to believe it as a shark and vote Brody out as police chief. Mike disobeys his father's orders by going sailing with his friends, taking his 10-year-old brother Sean. Marge, another teen, takes Sean with her, and they head out on 6 boats, going past a team of divers led by instructor Tom Andrews. Moments after submerging, Andrews encounters the shark. Panicking, he rushes to the surface, causing an embolism. Soon after, the shark hits the boat of teenage couple Eddie Marchand and Tina Wilcox and mauls Eddie to death. Brody and his wife Ellen witness Tom's evacuation by ambulance and hear that the other divers suspect that something scared him. Deputy Jeff Hendricks, who has taken over as Brody's replacement, tells them that Mike went sailing with his friends, So Brody and Ellen commandeer the police boat, aided by Hendrix to rescue them. They come across Tina's boat and she confirms the shark's presence. Brody hails a passing boat to take Hendrix, Ellen, and Tina to shore while he searches for the kids. Meanwhile, the shark attacks the group's boats, causing most of them to capsize or crash. Mike is knocked unconscious and falls into the water. The only pair whose boat is still seaworthy retrieve Mike and leave the others to take him ashore. Sean and the others remain adrift upon the wreckage. A harbor patrol helicopter that Brody contacted earlier arrives to tow them to Cable Junction, a small island nearby which houses an electrical relay station that supplies power to Amity. However, the shark surfaces and latches onto the chopper's pontoons, capsizing it and drowning the pilot. The shark knocks Sean into the water, and Marge is eaten while attempting to save him. Brody finds Mike, who informs him of the situation before Brody sends him to safety. Brody finds the others at Cable Junction. The cheering and jumping that greet him attract the shark, which attacks, causing Brody to maroon the police boat. Using an inflatable raft, he taps an underwater power cable with an oar to lure the shark toward him. The shark bites the cable and is electrocuted. Brody and the other survivors gather on Cable Junction to await rescue. Alright, I'll pop off some numbers here for you like always. So in 1978, Jaws 2 had a budget of $20 million with a box office return of $208 million, and we will go right to Chris for some inflation numbers.
Yeah, that would be a roughly 96, might as well say 100 million budget in modern times, and would be a roughly $1 billion box office gross in modern times. So,
Wow.
you're talking about an over 10x return on investment there, which is huge.
Yeah, so again, there's no wonder that there was a third one made, and as a lot of the sequels did back in the 80s and whatnot, if you make a third one, it's Friday the 13th 3 in 3D or Jaws 3 in 3D. So I got to see Friday the 13th 3D in all its shining glory finally, but never yet to see Jaws 3 in true 3D yet.
Yeah, and it is fascinating. But you think about modern times where they drop blockbusters that have 200, 250, $300 million budgets, another 100 to 150 million spent on promotion and advertisements, and they're lucky to make 1 billion. They're considered successful if they make 1 billion, and you got to imagine the days, longing for the days where, relatively speaking, with inflation, you could spend less than 100 million to produce a film and get $1 billion return on that investment. It's like, it shows that the state of the industry is really, in a rough patch with inflating costs and diminishing box office returns.
Yeah, I wish I had a number of like the percentage for like what films, even with inflation, like have actually grossed $1 billion or something. You figure out of all the movies that hit theaters, even with inflation, it would probably be like 1% of films that have ever hit theaters.
Yeah. It's getting to be more than you would think. And when you factor in inflation across all of the many decades, it's a lot more than you would think. But just when you consider in the modern age, when you have, like I said, this movie would be like spending 100 million and getting $1 billion back today. I don't know if there's ever been a movie that was that, like the first Joker was like a 60 million movie and it made $1 billion, like something like that happens. But then, they released Joker 2 and it cost $200 million, and that thing's a total flop. It's a total disaster. It's one of these things where it's like, it's such a gamble. Like 1 billion is not guaranteed. And when they're dropping, when the net between the budget and the marketing is getting to be, 250 to $350 million for these movies, and they're not hit, and it's like some of these movies have to hit $1 billion just to break even almost, when you consider that theaters keep their 50% roughly. And it's just like the fact that the industry isn't in this weird state of semi-collapse is shocking. I mean, I suppose it kind of is from some of the headlines you read. You know, you have studios getting bought and resold and combined and merged left and right. So you know, they're struggling a bit.
Yeah, and I mean, I was gonna bring that up too about the second Joker film. I didn't see the first one, so clearly I wouldn't go see the second one yet. But like we had just talked about, I went and seen Terrifier 3 when that came out, and this
Yeah.
I heard all the news that it just like trumped Joker 2. It was like an 82% decline from one weekend to the next for Joker 2.
Yeah, Terrifier 3 is definitely the superior clown movie to see. You know, we're dating our recording session here for when this episode drops, but I will say I was someone who did like Joker a lot, and I'm informed enough that I'm not wasting my money on Joker 2. I know enough people, and there's enough people that I agree with, and I've heard enough that I do not need to say, I do not need to be like, oh, well, let me just see it and form my own opinion. No, I know they've absolutely screwed the pooch on that sequel. They're not getting my money on it.
Well,
And
like
the
I
first
said,
one's good. I recommend the first one, but it's one of those things where, you know, it's like some of these movies that get bad sequels, like Starship Troopers or something, where you're like, hey, unless you're really, really, really invested, maybe just kind of stop at the first one and don't bother with the sequels, you know. So I would recommend the first one. It's a dark movie, but it's a very well made movie. Don't watch 2.
I will. I'll have to watch the first one just for your sake, because like I said, I haven't seen that. But it's one of those things that how do you pronounce his name?
Joaquin Phoenix.
Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
I liked him in quite a few of his movies. Probably one of my favorites with him was Ladder 49. So I like him as an actor. So it's always been on my list to check out.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, the first one is Oscar caliber all around, and you know, almost in the same way that I would tell people to just stop watching Star Wars after the original saga, the original 6. It's very much like, hey, just watch Joker, accept that it's a great movie, and don't even acknowledge that there's a sequel.
I gotcha. I'll spill some more numbers out for you here. Jaws 2 is rated a 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb, a 56% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, 51% rating on Metacritic, 51% rating on Metacritic. 75% of Google users like this film, so I will take that, 3 out of every 4. And then there are 7 deaths in this film, averaging out to 1 death every 16 and a half minutes. So that are my numbers for Jaws.
How does that death count compared to the first one? I wager it's higher.
Yes, there were 6 total deaths in the first film, which averaged out to 1 about every 20 and a half minutes.
Okay, so definitely up the ante in that regard.
Yeah, we get a little quicker, and I don't think the death scenes are as effective in this one as the first one. I clearly the first one is one of my favorite films of all time. So like again, it's hard for me to even compare. Even though this is for a sequel, I think this is a great sequel. But Jaws is just leaps and bounds one of the best films ever made, in my opinion.
You're making a sequel to an all-time classic, and a movie that a lot of movies get called all-time classics, but this is one of those movies that the original Jaws is absolutely an all-time classic, and making any sequel to it, it's only going to be a sequel to it.
As good as it is. Sorry, Jaws 2.
Yep.
But I mean, if you're the second best in your franchise, well,
It's not bad.
No, you're in the top 50% of your franchise.
Yeah. You're better than 2 of the other movies.
If I was the director, I would take it. I'll throw some fun facts at you. I don't have very many. There was a lot to choose from, but it was so much that went into each of them. I tried to choose some quick ones for us. Jaws 2 was briefly the highest grossing sequel in history until Rocky 2 was released in 1979. So it wasn't the highest grossing sequel for long, but when it comes to Rocky 2, that's a movie I love as well. I love the Rocky franchise, but I mean, it got to say that it was the highest grossing sequel for about a year.
That says a lot about the way the industry has changed, and that Jaws was the biggest movie of all time at the time that it released, and then the sequel is the biggest sequel of all time, at least for a brief window when it released. Like, that says a lot when you consider that nowadays so many films in general and almost all of the biggest hits are sequels, that the distinction of the highest grossing sequel used to mean something.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this will tell you a little bit about, horror sequels. Jaws 2 was the highest grossing horror sequel for over 20 years until it was surpassed by Hannibal in 2001.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow. And a lot of folks like don't even think of Hannibal as a horror movie in the traditional sense, once movies are kind of big enough, people want to call them thrillers or something like that, or mysteries or crime dramas or whatever. So that's a that's an interesting thing. I wonder what holds the horror sequel title now. Is it maybe It Chapter 2 perhaps? I'm not sure.
That is something I would have to dig into because I mean, those two films made bank. So I could definitely bet on that as one of them.
Yeah.
This film's tagline, "Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water," has become one of the most famous in film history and has been parodied and homaged several times.
Yeah, I mean it's it, it's a tagline that writes itself.
Yeah, I can't think of any offhand, but just like people have said, like, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the woods or something for Friday the 13th or something, not like anything official, but like you could almost do that with any movie, just when you thought it was safe to get back in a plane or in a car, whatever type of
Uh-huh.
movie you do, you could do
Just when you thought it was safe to have another zombie apocalypse.
that. Just when you thought it was safe to have another kid, the orphan. No.
Yeah. Oh man.
Mark Gilpin, who played Sean Brody, claims that when they were shooting one of the scenes on the makeshift raft of the wrecked yachts, they were being circled by a real hammerhead shark, and the actors were scared and began to scream and holler at the production crew, which filming that particular scene from a distance. The crew was oblivious to the danger and assumed the actors were simply in character and gave them the thumbs up.
Oh gosh. Could you imagine being out on the water and seeing a hammerhead shark and trying to get where was the safe word? Where was the Mayday official, the official sort of, this is what you do if there's a real problem. You start to swing and panic and everyone's like, "Hey, thumbs up, you're doing a great job."
Like, God, these guys are really getting into character. They're selling it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, good Lord Almighty.
On the Brody's front porch is a flower planter painted bright yellow, and it is one of the barrels from the first Jaws from 1975.
Oh, how fun. Nice. I always love when there's little connections like that between these movies.
Yeah, I didn't catch that, so I got the movie on Blu-ray and digital, so I went to the digital one real quick, and I was like, oh yeah, there it is, cool. Like, I like reading little stuff like that. It's cute little callbacks to the previous film.
For sure.
Jaws 2 is one of a cycle of 1980s and also late 70s movies that got made after the box office success of Jaws 1975. The films included this film and its two sequels after, Jaws 3D and Jaws the Revenge, as well as a number of ripoffs, as well as Orca from 1977, Piranha from 1978, Tentacles from 1977, Killer Fish from 79, Barracuda from 78, Tintorera, Killer Shark from 77, Blood Beach from 80, Piranha 2 The Spawning from 82, The Last Shark from 1981, Up from the Last Run from 79, Humanoids from the Deep from 1980, Island of the Fishmen from 79, Devilfish from 84, and Mako, The Jaws of Death from 1976. So Jaws being such a big hit, it was just like rip off shark movie after shark movie after shark movie, and or killer fish, or and I mean you could even do uh grizzly, or there's so many rip offs from the original Jaws where people just put a different animal or shark or snake or crocodile or something to make just a little bit of bang for a $10, try to make $100 off a $10 bill, and a lot of them work.
Yeah, and I mean, well, how many action movies get described as it's Die Hard on a train or Die Hard on a plane or something like that? So you can only imagine how many creature features were pitched as it's Jaws with this, it's Jaws with that, it's Jaws on land, And something tells me that some of those movies might be in our future on this podcast. So we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. I always look forward to covering some creature feature movies, so I can't wait to get to some of them. My last one for you here is this is the only Jaws movie which does not begin with the shark's view of point on screen, but like the other three movies, it still begins underwater.
Yep. I mean, got to keep the tradition going, but you certainly do get the shark early, even if it's not a POV.
Yeah, absolutely. That I mean, I like the opening scene to this. In any type of creature feature movie, or like as we've said before, like a bear movie, shark movie, croc, snake, whatever it may be, you have to start with somebody being attacked by whatever animal it may be that is going to be the attacker, the antagonist in this movie.
Yeah, you have to have that stinger at the beginning to set the tone.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all I have for you on fun facts for Jaws 2. All right, we can get into some character on Jaws 2. My favorite character was Chief Brody. I mean, he's just kind of got like the tragic story in here. Like he lived through the first Jaws and shark attack in that film, and he's thinks that there's another one around. He sees that there's a killer whale that gets washed up and that was attacked out at sea, and he automatically assumes it's a shark. And everybody's like, well, it could have been this, it could have been that, and he's like, no, I'm it's a shark. Like he's determined to prove to everyone in this town that that a shark is back, and nobody believes him. He ends up getting fired from his job, and it's just like, this is a guy that you can easily root for during the film, and as you're watching it, as the viewer that he's right, and nobody in the film believes him. Like the only one, like in a bonus credit scene, the only one who voted for him not to get fired, which I thought was fun, was the mayor, Larry Vaughn. And I think he's kind of got like a tragic story in this one, how everyone thinks he's crazy and he ends up losing his job. So he ended up being my favorite character.
Yeah, at an early example, I'm sure not the earliest, but of these genre movies where you have the character that knows the truth that nobody is trusting. This is a textbook example of that, and I'm in agreement. Brody was my favorite character as well. Carrying, the actor may have been not interested in the film or unhappy the whole time, but I think he's doing he's not phoning it in my opinion, for this one, and I think he gives a very, we get a very solid performance, and that Brody's still a solid, compelling protagonist.
Yeah, as much as he didn't want to do this film, like people that were on the film with him, have stated, like, you could tell that like he still gave it his all, which even for not wanting to do a sequel, I mean, it's awesome that he put in the effort he did, and you can see it on screen that it's all out in this film. I think he does great.
Yeah, and again, at this point in time, there was a long stretch of time where sequels were just considered. There was a time where Hollywood and the entertainment industry absolutely valued what's new, what's original, what's fresh. And the idea of just doing another one of anything, even a mega hit, was really looked down on. For a long stretch there, outside of maybe the James Bond movies and the Godzilla movies, it was not common to have franchises of entry after entry. Sequels were kind of perceived as kind of like cash grabs, and uninventive and just retreads and reruns done quicker, cheaper, less creative than the originals they were being sequels to. That whole the age of sequels that were as good as or superior to the originals wasn't really common at this point. So it would be easy to understand how everyone involved could just be like, "Oh, Spielberg's not back. This is all just, gosh, we're all just back doing this other one." It'd be easy for the drop off from the first to this one to be a lot larger than it is. It felt like everyone was still trying to give it their best.
Yeah, absolutely. And clearly, why this is to many the best sequel out of the three. I think the acting is great. Even the young teens, I think they give it their all, and they don't do a bad job. For some of them, this might have been their first film, or some of them might have had a couple TV episodes or something back in the day. But to do a film that's as big as this, and we keep going back to a sequel to a film as big as Jaws, to have a
Mhm.
bunch of young teens and whatnot in it and be the basis of the last 40 minutes of your movie out, they're out sailing and getting attacked. I think this film and the characters in it do a phenomenal job.
Agreed.
What was your favorite score or OST from the film?
Yeah. So before saying anything, I want to say that I was pleasantly surprised to see that John Williams was back for this one. I knew that the lead was back, and I knew that Spielberg was not. I would not have been able to tell you off the top of my head if John Williams returned or not. It was pleasant to see that he was, and he's probably the one carryover element from the first movie that is sort of keeping it more or less just as good as the first, at least in the music department. The original is the icon, but I think his score for this is really sort of the line between this one being, a kind of legitimate feeling sequel and just being a complete, cash in. And my favorite track that he did for this film is called Ballet for Divers. And it's just this kind of weirdly sort of whimsical musical sort of sequence when there's a lot of characters in the water, getting up to their business of, being on their boats or swimming or what have you. And it's just this really, really kind of great sort of musical kind of sequence where there's little dialogue and it's all just kind of being told in visuals, and you're kind of just getting this vibe of, well, you know, it's all doomed, so to speak. So that was a track that I liked the most.
Is that the track where they are diving for the lobsters? Or is
Uh,
that
um, oh gosh, there might have been some of that because it's kind of like a montagey kind of a sequence, and it just feels like it's called Ballet for Divers, and it feels like it's almost ballet music. It's weird, kind of just montage of water business going on.
okay? And again, I liked a lot of this soundtrack. Again, John Williams, I don't think out of all the films I've seen that he's composed, I don't think he's missed once. I mean, he's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up
Agreed.
choosing uh, a track called Sharks Attack Water Skier. And that, again, was right at the beginning, but it's a very fast and like ramped up soundtrack. So like I like how it encompasses the scene and whatnot. Of course, we'll put a little here of our favorite soundtracks in here. But that's one that it kind of like the film's going kind of slow. She's out water skiing, and like the anything with like music, there's none, and all you hear is like the boat motor, and then you see the shark's fin pop out of the water, and that music kicks in, and it's really like
Intense.
thank you. It goes from 0 to 100, and it's just a very intense scene, and I think John Williams does a phenomenal job with that track and just like how it goes with the scene and the shark attack. It's a chase scene, so I think the music goes very well with that. How it comes on and just continues to like ramp up throughout the scene. Thank you for that. I don't know why I could not think of intense.
That's what you got me here for. I'm the
I'm
human
telling you.
thesaurus. I'm the thesaurus over here.
Sometimes I struggle with words, man. English is hard.
It aren't that hard.
Right. All right, I'll go ahead and give you my favorite quote. And I of course I chose a Chief Brody quote. And it's when they're at like I don't know if they're having like a town hall meeting about Brody. He had just shot up the beach, and he gets the picture developed where like he sees like the shark's eye and part of its mouth, and he takes it to him, and they're kind of giving him crap, and he goes, but I'm telling you, and I'm telling everybody at this table that that's a shark, and I know what a shark looks like because I've seen one up close, and you better do something about this one because I don't intend to go through that hell again. And he's just screaming it, and you can feel the emotion, and you believe this guy, like you, as you've seen in the first film, he did go through the hell with the shark. He came out on top, and nobody believes him that a shark is bad. And I think it's kind of comedic how people are like, one of the old man looks at the picture and he's like, seaweed, and they're like, I don't know, what is it? And he's like, are you kidding me? Like, and then he just kind of goes off on that rant, and that's my favorite quote, because you can feel the emotion that like he's trying to get these people to believe him, and nobody does. And I think in that scene is a turning point where he knows that he's going to have to handle it on his own.
Yeah, it's a great moment, and again, shades of the kind of scenes you see in later films. You think about the scene in Aliens where Sigourney Weaver as Ripley is trying to convince them all of what really transpired and the real dangers of what happened to her in the first movie, and they're just not having it. It's like you love to see sequences like that. For my favorite line of dialogue, I went with a little bit of a gallows humor moment near the end where they're adrift, and they ask, one of the characters asks, what's after Cable Junction, and then another one replies, the Atlantic, then Ireland. It's like, yeah, it's like if this doesn't get resolved at Cable Junction, then we're kind of up a creek without a paddle. And I love stuff like that.
Absolutely. I always got a kick out of right after that. The guy's like, God, I'm hungry. And it's like, I can relate.
Yeah.
I am that character that's always
Yeah.
hungry.
Yeah. Well, and no matter how dire any situation is, there's always someone who's kind of going to just be a little bit snarky about the whole thing. And so I like that.
Absolutely. Great choice. Great choice. What was your favorite scene in the film, if it differs from like your favorite shark attack
It
sequence?
it actually does. Or well, I at least wanted to make a different pick for the sake of a different pick. So the scene that I chose is actually one you mentioned, which is Brody firing into the water at nothing. To me, that is just like the epitome of showing the carryover of the trauma and turmoil of the first movie, that he's so freaked out about, keeping things safe and what happened, and not wanting to see a retread of what went before, that he's literally firing bullets into the ocean, and that just encapsulates the state of his character in this movie, and I liked that scene the most.
Yeah, it's like to us as a viewer, we're thinking, all right, like this guy's just he's trying to take care of business because like as a kid, I thought it might have been a shark. I didn't might not have thought it was the shark from the film, but I thought it might have been like how in the first one they caught the tiger shark and they were like, "Oh, this is the one." And it's like, "No, okay, like so in the second one I thought, all right, maybe it's just another shark." But to the people that are in the film, like his family or people that are on the beach, he's losing his mind. But to us,
Mhm.
we really know what's going on. So that's absolutely a great scene.
Yeah, he goes full Ahab, as they say.
My favorite scene of the film kind of goes along, or it does go along with my favorite score from the film, and that's the attack on the water skier, and then where the shark gets burned. I think it's a great effect where the shark is in flames and the boat explodes, and I think that whole sequence is just a great like tone setter early on in the film, and then we get a scarred up shark for the rest of the film, which I think is a great look. It's something different. In the first film, we don't have anything but our great white shark, and in this one, it kind of gets burned and gets a taste of its own medicine in a way, gets some pain early on, and I think it's a great look throughout the film.
Yeah, the exploding boat scene was actually my favorite shark attack as well, just because it goes, it's the definition of that escalated quickly. It just kind of goes from 0 to 60 so fast. Of oh, now there's fire everywhere, and then the boat explodes. It's like, good lordy, like that got really, you know, that got really intense really fast.
It did. Like and that's why I think I like that scene so much in the film is the music. It kind of just pops up out of nowhere and then you see this shark chasing down this speedboat and it's like, this thing's hauling ass and it's like can a shark really go that fast? And you look it up and you think, okay, well, great whites can swim fast for short bursts. So it's like, okay, maybe this is possible, but that
which would Yeah, which would probably be one of the scariest things in the world to see. Like to see a great white shark that's maybe just kind of gliding and then it kind of goes into that faster gear. That would have to just make you pass out from fear?
Yeah, I want zero part of that. No.
Yeah. And I don't know what would be scarier, seeing the fin speed up towards you or to see it disappear under the water while you're in the water.
I'm gonna go with disappear.
Yeah, because then you can't track it. You don't know where it's at. Oh my gosh. I, you know, I don't think I have phobias and fears, but being out in the open water, I do not have a desire to do that, to just be kind of treading water out in the ocean for any period of time.
No, I don't mind it, but if I'm out there and I see a fin, I might get out pretty quick. I say I always wanted to go cage dive in and stuff like that. Well, that's a little different than being in the open water with a 12 or 14-foot great white or something like that.
I will leave the thrills for the thrill seekers.
You will leave the thrills for chills and thrills. No.
Yes, precisely.
All right, so your favorite shark attack was actually the boat. Was pretty much
Mhm.
my favorite scene.
Indeed. Yep.
I ended up going with a different one since I chose the attack on the water skier for my favorite scene. I went with the shark attack for was actually Marge, who was the the girl who Sean was actually riding with, who when Sean gets dumped into the water, she actually tries to help him, and she has trouble getting up back onto her boat, and she's like, "Please help me! I can't get up." And you just
Mhm.
see the shark like an over the top angle of it, like creeping up on her, and then it just comes out
Mhm.
of the water. And the way that they did that was fun as well. They had divers underneath her that when the animatronic shark comes up, they pull her down so it looks like the shark actually kind of like engulfed her or ate her. And I just
Sheesh.
think the view of the shark coming up to get her, just barely underneath the water, you see the teeth and like the mouth. I think that's like a if you're like afraid of sharks or anything like that or a young kid, I think that's a terrifying sight to see that shark coming up just ready to take someone that there's nothing they can do. She can't get back on the boat and she's stuck. So I that was my favorite shark attack.
Yeah, that's an exceptional moment for sure. Very well chosen.
I wanted to give an honorable mention to Tina and Eddie, where like he's fighting, like the shark grabs a hold of him and like kind of rams him into her boat, and he's like fighting so hard to hold on that he rips a chunk of her boat off.
Yeah.
I thought that was greatly done. I thought, this guy's
Yeah.
fighting so hard to live that he actually rips a chunk of wood of her boat off, and that it shows the how bad he wanted to live, but then that shows the strength of this shark as well.
Yeah, very well done. And of course, I love the way that they dispatched the shark in this one. That to me, that was the scene that had always stuck out to me as the one that I remembered from when I was a kid was how they took out the shark at the end of this one, which was with the cable. There was a long period of time where if you'd asked me, well, how do they kill the shark in Jaws? I wouldn't have been able to tell you, well, is it the first one that they blow it up, or is it the second one that they electrocute it? I wouldn't have been able to, there was a stretch of time there, probably about 10 years or so, where I wouldn't have been able to tell you which one was which.
Yeah, and after maybe not when so much when I was younger, but as I got older and was watching the film, it's like, okay, I can see like what filmmakers were thinking. Like, all right, we shoved a scuba or a dive tank in his mouth and blew him up in the first one. Like, what do you do next? Like, how do you top that? And I don't know if this ending tops that first, the blowing up of the shark, but set like electrocuting it and setting it on fire. Like, I think it's a great effect at the end. I like how the shark kind of rises up and like you can see it just speeding towards Brody, and he's like, "Open wide, say ah!" And you get
Yeah.
the view of the shark, and I think that's a phenomenal ending, and if not just under, it might be up to par with the first one of ways to dispatch a shark.
Yeah, it's not quite as flashy, but it uh it kind of has the added bonus of feeling like it puts Brody in even more jeopardy or just as much jeopardy because he might get electrocuted as well or caught in the ensuing sort of, you know, fiery explosion that happens. So it's like it kind of like you kind of get that moment where it's like, ooh, is he going to make it? Did he make it? Is it going to get him too? Whereas with it's shooting it in the mouth, it's like he's kind of off to the side, kind of off in the distance, and so it's like he's just kind of waiting for his moment. This one, it's like, oh man, that shark! Like, if the cable doesn't, really do its thing or get hit the right way, like it's kind of like his last hurrah for what might take the shark out.
And I always wondered when I was younger, the first time I seen this, it was like, is that really the end? Or I always wondered, like, is the shark gonna come back for one last like scare, or and then it kind of just after it sinks away, it's done, and it's like, oh, okay, like it really is dead. You always wonder in these films, like, did that really kill the shark, or is it, do we have one last scare? Because I'm ready for it.
Yeah, I always kind of watching any creature feature movies like these growing up with a friend, you'd always have the moment where it's like, okay, so we have like the giant one and they always, blow up or kill the giant one at the end. It's like, wouldn't it be wild if there was also uh, after that you just have like a regular one that shows up and disrupts things, like you blow up the big killer shark and then oh yeah, you're still in the ocean and then this random shark gets you, like this random one pops up and is up to a bit of nonsense, or you killed the giant crocodile, but then there's this other random one that pops up. They kind of did that in Lake Placid for a moment. They kind of did that, but I always just thought like, wow, that would be a wild way to get one last kind of kill and scare by just being like, okay, we got the giant shark, but then this regular shark popped in for some nonsense,
The hammerhead.
Yeah, exactly, precisely.
We killed the great white, and now since he's gone, the big hammerhead came out from the depths. He was hiding from the great white, and now he's out for some blood.
Yeah, exactly.
We went and some shark design. Like I said, you can't beat the animatronics of these days. Like I absolutely love them and think they're fun from these first two films. I love when films nowadays do that as well, like how Lake Placid, they actually built part of an animatronic, like crocodile. They still use some like CGI and stuff, but that wasn't quite up to par or where it's at today, clearly. But I love when films use animatronics, and I think they did a great job in this film as well. I mean, for what, 45 years old, I mean, or close to it, these films look great for what they are with the shark.
Yeah, and for things like sharks and gators that people don't really get a chance to see up close and in detail, the practical animatronic effects end up holding up quite well. CGI always eventually, after 10 years, most CGI just kind of loses a lot of its luster and the realism just kind of fades. But the practical effects, even if it's not necessarily the most hyper realistic, finely detailed animatronic compared to a real thing, most people are never going to get a good enough look or feel of the real thing to be able to kind of discern that difference. So it's physically there, and you can never take away the fact that it's physically there, no matter how much animatronics improve in the future.
I always thought that, like you're in the water in one of these films, and they were filmed on the open ocean. So it's like you see the animatronics fin, and I always wondered, like, was there a point in time where somebody that was in the film, that was in the water, like, seen the film and wondered to themselves, like, all right, well, is this the animatronic shark, or am I going to get attacked here?
Yeah, precisely. Oh man, yeah. Imagine anxiety. You're thinking you're seeing the animatronic fin, and it's possibly a real one.
Granted, the animatronic like is 25 feet long or so, but I mean, if you only see part of the fin or something like that, it's like, all right, well, that's not as big as the animatronic. So
Yeah, I would never be terribly enthusiastic about filming any movie on the open water out there like that.
it would be fun and it would be an experience, but you'd probably definitely have a little skepticism about it.
Yeah, it would be unique for sure.
I think that's all I have for Jaws 2. I got some final thoughts, of course, as always. We can. I'm sure people can assume what we're gonna do for our like rankings of the film, But final thoughts for me on Jaws 2 is it's fun. I mean, all these films that we've done so far are probably recommends for me, maybe besides like Godzilla's Revenge. But I mean, I have fun with this one. I go back to it probably once a year. I for sure watch it every year. I mean, usually around like 4th of July time or like holidays, like these films or the Jurassic Parks or something. There's always a marathon on some channel, and it's just, I think this is a great sequel to what a film that was, in my opinion, probably easily one of my like top 5 favorite films of all time. And they did a great job. I wish we could have got more of Chief Brody and Roy Scheider in upcoming sequels, but he didn't even want to make this film, so I understand not coming back for a third one. But I have fun with this. This is probably one of my favorite sequels of all time. So this film ranks pretty high for me, and I'm also a shark lover, so that makes it easy to like.
Yeah, first things first. Don't pretend like the Godzilla anime trilogy is worth recommending. And then second thing. Yeah, this is a. I agree with pretty much everything you said. It's a worthy sequel. The downgrade is there, and it can never be the first one. But there's a window there where it's like, okay, the sequel isn't as good as the first one, but is it still a good entry in its own right and kind of worth seeing and worth recommending? And Jaws 2 is a pretty solid follow up. You're never going to get the first film again, but this is, you can do a lot worse with Jaws movies, and you can do a lot worse with shark movies than Jaws 2. It's still in the sort of the upper level of what this genre and franchise has to offer. So, I would say, if you like the first one a lot, this one isn't gonna destroy the legacy of the original or ruin your day for watching.
Yeah, I'm a big nerd, so I watch like ranking videos on shark movies and stuff like that, and most of the time on every shark ranking video, top 10 shark movies of all time, Jaws 2 is on there. And Jaws is normally number 1, Jaws 2, most of the time it's top 10. I've seen it as high as like number 3 or as low as number 8, 9. So I mean, there's hundreds of shark movies out there, and if this is in most people's top 10s, it's probably worth the watch.
Yeah, Jaws would probably be the only franchise or shark related that where 2 entries could actually be in a top 10 of the genre. I've got my own hot take for greatest shark movie of all time, but we will get to it one day.
You mean, Sharknado 1 and 2 wouldn't be in your top 10?
I hate to break it to all those diehard Sharknado fans, but, I think they're right outside the top 10, maybe,
Yeah, all 6 of them. No.
Good golly.
All right, I think that's all we got for Jaws 2. We are doing the sequel. This film was followed up by Jaws 3 or Jaws 3D, which was released on July 22nd, 1983. So before we get to that next week, as always, I will say, Chris, thank you again for joining me. I always appreciate it. And I've been waiting to hear your opinion on Jaws 3 since it was pretty much a first-time watch for you, so I can't wait to get to it next time.
Yeah, and I'm playing it. I'm playing it close to the chest here. We will find out next week.
All right, awesome. Again, can't wait. So again, thank you for joining me. Thanks anyone who's out there listening. Jaws 3 or Jaws 3D on our next episode. But until next time.
But I'm telling you, and I'm telling everybody at this table, that that's a shark. And I know what a shark looks like because I've seen one up close. And you better do something about this one, because I don't intend to go through that hell again.